Sarah grew up in the small town of Maplewood, where everyone knew each other's business. She lived in a white house with blue shutters on Elm Street, the same house where her mother had grown up. People in town respected the Wilson family. Sarah's father owned the local hardware store, and her mother taught piano lessons to most of the children in town. Sarah was always a bit different from the other girls her age. While they dreamed of marrying local boys and settling down in Maplewood, Sarah wanted to see the world. After high school, she did something no one expected. She went to college in the big city, 2 hours away. Her parents worried, but they were proud of their smart daughter. At college, Sarah studied to become a teacher. She loved learning and made many new friends. Her world grew bigger with each passing day. In her final year, she met James in the campus library. He was studying to be a doctor. James had a warm smile that made Sarah feel safe, and he listened to her in a way no one ever had before. James grew up in the city. His father drove a bus, and his mother worked as a nurse. They taught him to work hard and be kind. James was smart and determined. He won a scholarship to medical school and studied late into the night. When he met Sarah, he was immediately drawn to her curious mind and gentle heart. Sarah and James began spending all their free time together. They would talk for hours about books, their dreams, and the places they wanted to visit. Sarah knew she was falling in love. For the first time in her life, she felt truly understood. When Sarah graduated, she got a job teaching at a school near the college. She and James moved into a small apartment together. Their life was simple but happy. James continued his medical studies while Sarah taught her third-grade class. On weekends, they explored the city or cooked dinner with friends. Sarah had never been happier. After dating for 2 years, James asked Sarah to marry him during a picnic in the park. He got down on one knee and pulled out a small ring. It wasn't fancy, but Sarah thought it was perfect. She said yes without hesitation. That weekend, Sarah drove back to Maplewood to share her happy news. She was so excited that she barely noticed how quiet her parents became when she showed them the picture of James on her phone. Her mother's smile looked stiff. Her father cleared his throat and asked questions about James's family. "When can we meet him?" her mother finally asked. "I was hoping to bring him home next weekend," Sarah replied. The following Saturday, Sarah drove James to Maplewood. As they passed the "Welcome to Maplewood" sign, Sarah squeezed James's hand. "They're going to love you," she said confidently. But when they arrived at the Wilson house, Sarah's parents were cold and formal. Her father barely shook James's hand. Her mother kept finding reasons to leave the room. The lunch was painfully quiet. Later that afternoon, Sarah and James walked downtown to get ice cream. Sarah wanted to show James the town where she grew up. As they walked down Main Street, Sarah noticed people staring. Mrs. Peterson, who had known Sarah her whole life, crossed the street to avoid talking to them. Mr. Johnson, who always had a friendly word for everyone, suddenly became very interested in a store window when he saw them coming. Back at her parents' house, Sarah's father called her into his study while James helped her mother with the dishes. "Sarah," he said slowly, "are you sure about this engagement?" "Of course I'm sure. I love James," Sarah replied. "But he's not like us," her father said, not meeting her eyes. "People talk, Sarah. This town has certain traditions." Sarah felt like someone had thrown cold water on her. "You mean because James is black?" she asked directly. Her father didn't answer, but his silence told her everything. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her father's words and the way people in town had looked at her and James. In the morning, she found her mother alone in the kitchen making coffee. "Mom, do you have a problem with James?" Sarah asked directly. Her mother sighed and put down her coffee cup. "Sarah, I just want what's best for you. Life is hard enough without making it harder. James is what's best for me," Sarah said firmly. "You think that now, but what about in 5 years? 10 years? What about when you have children? Think about how hard their lives would be in a town like this." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. So you're saying I shouldn't marry the man I love because of what other people might think? I'm saying you should be practical, her mother replied. There are plenty of nice boys around here. What about Tom Mitchell? He always liked you in high school. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. She and James left Maplewood that afternoon, cutting their visit short. On the drive back to the city, James was quiet. I'm sorry about my parents, Sarah finally said. They'll come around. They just need time. James took her hand. Sarah, I've dealt with this my whole life. It's nothing new to me. But it's new to you, and I'm worried about what it will do to you. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I've never been more sure of anything, Sarah said, squeezing his hand. But as the wedding date grew closer, things got worse. Sarah's parents called less and less. When they did call, they never asked about James or the wedding plans. Sarah sent them an invitation, but they never responded. Sarah's childhood friend Liza was supposed to be her maid of honor, but 2 weeks before the wedding, she called to say she couldn't make it. Her excuse was flimsy, something about her cat being sick. One by one, most of Sarah's friends from Maplewood found reasons why they couldn't attend. James's family was different. His parents welcomed Sarah with open arms. His mother taught her how to cook James's favorite meals. His father told her funny stories about James as a child. His sisters included her in their shopping trips and movie nights. With them, Sarah felt accepted and loved. The wedding was small but beautiful. It took place in a garden with flowers of every color. James's large family filled the seats on one side. On Sarah's side, only her college friends attended. The empty seats where her family should have been felt like a physical pain in her chest. As Sarah walked down the aisle alone, she saw some people from Maplewood watching from outside the garden fence. They weren't there to celebrate. They were there to stare and whisper. Sarah held her head high and kept walking toward James. When she reached him and saw the love in his eyes, she knew she was making the right choice. During the reception, Sarah kept checking her phone, hoping for a message from her parents. Nothing came. James noticed her disappointment and pulled her onto the dance floor. Today is about us, he said, holding her close. Just us. They danced and laughed with their friends and James's family. For a few hours, Sarah forgot about the people who weren't there. After the wedding, Sarah and James moved into a small apartment in the city. They were happy together, building their new life. James was finishing medical school, and Sarah taught at an elementary school nearby. Their days were full and busy. Then one day, Sarah got a call from her mother. Her father had had a heart attack. He was in the hospital in Maplewood. Sarah and James drove there immediately. When they arrived at the hospital, Sarah's mother was sitting alone in the waiting room. Her face was pale and tired. When she saw Sarah, she burst into tears. But when she noticed James standing behind Sarah, her expression changed. "What is he doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. "He's my husband, Mom," Sarah replied. "We come as a package now." Sarah's mother looked away. "Your father wouldn't want him here." James put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It's okay. I'll wait in the cafeteria." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Dad is sick, and you're a doctor. You're coming with me." Sarah walked past her mother into her father's hospital room. James followed quietly. Her father lay in the bed, looking small and pale. Tubes and wires connected him to beeping machines. When he saw Sarah, his eyes filled with tears. Then he noticed James, and his face hardened. "What is he doing here?" he asked, his voice weak but angry. "I wanted to help," James said gently. "I'm almost finished with medical school. I could look at your charts, talk to your doctors." "I don't need your help," Sarah's father said. He turned his face away. Sarah felt torn between the family she was born into and the family she had chosen. That night, she and James got a room at the only motel in Maplewood. People stared at them as they checked in. The motel owner gave them a room at the very end of the building, far from other guests. For 3 days, Sarah went to the hospital while James waited in the motel room. Her father was getting better, but he still refused to see James. On the 4th day, as Sarah sat by her father's bed, he finally spoke about the situation. "Sarah, people are talking. Mrs. Peterson from church says she saw you two at the motel." He said the word two like it tasted bad in his mouth. "Dad, I don't care what people say. James is my husband. I love him. But why him? Of all the men in the world, why did you have to pick someone so different?" Sarah tried to explain how kind James was, how smart and funny and caring. Her father didn't seem to hear any of it. To him, James would always be an outsider, someone who didn't belong with his daughter. Meanwhile, James was having his own troubles in Maplewood. When he went to the diner for lunch, the waitress took everyone else's order first. When he tried to buy a newspaper at the corner store, the owner followed him around as if he might steal something. Everywhere he went, people either stared or looked away. One afternoon, James was walking back to the motel when a group of men stepped out of the local bar. They had been drinking and were looking for trouble. "Hey, you're the one who married the Wilson girl, aren't you?" one of them called out. James kept walking, pretending not to hear. "I'm talking to you," the man said, stepping in front of James. "What makes you think you can come to our town and take one of our girls?" "I didn't take anyone," James said calmly. "Sarah made her own choice." The men laughed. "Yeah, well, she made the wrong one." James tried to walk away, but the men surrounded him. That's when Sheriff Taylor drove by in his police car. He slowed down and rolled down his window. "Everything okay here, boys?" he asked. The men backed off. "Just having a friendly chat," one of them said. "Well, take your friendly chat somewhere else," the sheriff said. He nodded at James. "You okay, son?" James was surprised by the sheriff's kindness. "Yes, sir. Thank you." After the men left, Sheriff Taylor got out of his car. "You're Dr. Wilson now, I guess." "Yes, sir," James said. "My daughter had you as a teacher," the sheriff said to James's surprise. "Mrs. Wilson, I mean, before you two got married. Becky said she was the best teacher she ever had." James smiled. "Sarah loves teaching." "Look," the sheriff said, "not everyone in this town thinks the same way. Just be careful, okay?" That small act of kindness gave James hope. Maybe things could change in Maplewood, even if it would take time. That evening, when Sarah returned to the motel, she had news. Her father was being released from the hospital tomorrow. Her parents had asked her to come back home to help care for him. "But they don't want me to bring you," she said, her voice breaking. James took her hands. "What do you want to do?" Sarah looked into his eyes. "I want us to go home. Our home." Sarah and James returned to the city that night. The lights of the tall buildings welcomed them home. In their small apartment, they could be themselves again. No stares, no whispers, no cold shoulders. James went back to his medical studies, and Sarah returned to her classroom of eager third graders. Months passed without any word from Sarah's parents. She sent cards for birthdays and holidays, but they never replied. She called every Sunday, but the conversations were short and strained. Her mother would talk about the weather or church gossip, never asking about James or their life together. Her father barely spoke at all. 1 year after their wedding, James graduated from medical school. Sarah sat in the audience, clapping and cheering as he received his diploma. James's large family filled several rows, all of them beaming with pride. Sarah had sent her parents an invitation to the ceremony, but they didn't come. That night, as they celebrated with James's family at a nice restaurant, James's father raised his glass in a toast. "To my son, the doctor," he said. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder. And to Sarah, who has been by your side through the hard times. You're a daughter to us now." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She had lost one family but gained another. After graduation, James got a job at City Hospital. He worked long hours, often coming home after Sarah was already asleep. but he loved helping people, and Sarah loved seeing him so fulfilled. Their life was good, even without her family's approval. Then one day, Sarah got a call from Maplewood. It was Mrs. Peterson from her parents' church. "Sarah, dear, I thought you should know. Your mother had a fall. She broke her hip. She's at Maplewood Hospital." Sarah thanked Mrs. Peterson for calling and immediately packed a bag. James came home to find her getting ready to leave. "I'm coming with you," he said as soon as she told him what happened. "James, you know how they feel about you." "I know, but you shouldn't have to face this alone." They drove to Maplewood together. At the hospital, they found Sarah's father sitting alone in the waiting room. He looked older and smaller than Sarah remembered. When he saw them, he stood up slowly. "She's in surgery," he said to Sarah, not acknowledging James. "How serious is it?" Sarah asked. "The doctor said the break is bad. She's old, and her bones are fragile." James stepped forward. "I could talk to her doctors if you'd like. Sometimes it helps to have a medical perspective." Sarah's father finally looked at James. His face showed a battle between pride and need. Finally, need won. "That would be helpful," he admitted. James nodded and went to find the doctors. Sarah sat next to her father in silence. After a while, he spoke again. "Your mother misses you," he said quietly. "She would never say it, but she does." "I miss her too," Sarah replied. "I miss both of you." Her father sighed deeply. "We made a mistake, Sarah. We let our old ways of thinking come between us and our only child." Sarah was shocked by his words. Before she could respond, James returned with a doctor. "Mr. Wilson, this is Dr. Chen. She's your wife's surgeon," James said. Dr. Chen explained that the surgery had gone well, but Mrs. Wilson would need extensive rehabilitation. She would need help at home for several weeks, maybe months. "Do you have someone who can assist with her care?" Dr. Chen asked. Sarah's father looked lost. He lived alone with his wife, and most of their friends were as old as they were. "I can stay and help," Sarah offered. She looked at James, who nodded in agreement. "We both can," James added. "I have some vacation time saved up." Sarah's father looked at them both, his face a mix of gratitude and discomfort. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time he had ever thanked James for anything. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. Sarah's mother came home from the hospital 3 days later. She was surprised to find Sarah waiting at the house, but she was shocked to see James there too. She didn't say much as they helped her into the house and got her settled in her bedroom. "Why is he here?" she whispered to Sarah when James went to get her medication. "He's here because I'm here, Mom," Sarah replied, "and because he wants to help." Living together in the small house was not easy. Sarah's father slept on the couch so Sarah and James could use the spare bedroom. Meals were quiet and tense. When James tried to start conversations, Sarah's mother would give short answers or none at all. But slowly, things began to change. Sarah's mother couldn't get up the stairs to the bathroom by herself. James was strong enough to help her. At first, she refused his help, but after one painful attempt with only Sarah assisting, she gave in. "Thank you," she said stiffly the first time James helped her up the stairs. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sarah's father watched how carefully James treated his wife. He saw the way James checked her medication, adjusted her pillows, and made sure she was comfortable. One evening, he found James in the kitchen looking through medical books. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm reading about hip fractures in older patients," James explained. "I want to make sure we're doing everything right for your wife's recovery." Sarah's father stood there for a moment. "Would you like some coffee?" he finally asked. The two men sat at the kitchen table with their coffee cups. They didn't talk much, but they sat together in the same room without tension for the first time. As the days passed, the awkwardness began to fade. James would read the newspaper to Sarah's mother while she rested. Sarah's father started asking James questions about his work at the hospital. They were small steps, but important ones. One afternoon, Sarah went to the grocery store, leaving James alone with her parents. When she returned, she found them all in the living room looking at old photo albums. "Your mother was showing me your baby pictures," James said with a smile. Sarah was amazed. Her mother had her hand on James's arm as she pointed at a photo of Sarah on her first bicycle. Her father was actually laughing at something James had said. That night, in their bedroom, Sarah hugged James tightly. "Thank you for being so patient with them," she whispered. "They're trying," James said. "That's all we can ask for." After 2 weeks, James had to return to the city for work. Sarah stayed behind to continue helping her parents. The night before he left, Sarah's mother asked him to join her on the porch swing. "You're a good doctor," she said, "and a good man." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson," James replied. "I was wrong about you," she continued. "I was raised to think certain ways, to believe certain things. It's hard to change when you're old like me." "It's never too late to change," James said gently. Inside the house, Sarah watched them through the window. Her heart felt full. The next morning, when James was leaving, Sarah's father shook his hand. "Drive safely," he said, "and come back soon." These were the most welcoming words he had ever spoken to James. Sarah continued to stay with her parents for another month. During that time, she reconnected with some old friends from school. Some of them admitted they had been wrong about her marriage. Others remained distant. Sarah didn't mind. She had learned who her true friends were. James came back every weekend. Each time, he was welcomed a little more warmly. By the time Sarah's mother was fully recovered, something remarkable had happened. Sarah's parents had come to respect James, maybe even to like him. When it was time for Sarah and James to return to their life in the city, Sarah's mother hugged them both goodbye. "You'll come for Christmas?" she asked hopefully. "We wouldn't miss it," Sarah promised. As they drove away from Maplewood, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The town that had rejected them was slowly beginning to accept them. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. 5 years passed. Sarah and James settled into their life in the city. James became a respected doctor at the hospital. Sarah continued teaching, now at a school just a few blocks from their apartment. They visited Maplewood for holidays and special occasions. Each visit was easier than the last. Sarah's parents even came to visit them in the city twice a year. Sarah's mother loved exploring the big department stores and eating at fancy restaurants. Sarah's father enjoyed the baseball games James took him to. They were becoming a real family. One spring morning, Sarah woke up feeling sick. She had been tired for weeks, but today she could barely get out of bed. James insisted on running some tests at the hospital. That evening, he came home with a big smile on his face. "You're pregnant," he told her. Sarah couldn't believe it. They had been trying to have a baby for years without success. Now, finally, their dream was coming true. They called Sarah's parents that night to share the good news. "I'm going to be a grandmother." Sarah's mother cried with joy. "When are you due?" "November," Sarah told her. "We'll come help after the baby is born," her father promised. The next few months flew by. Sarah and James turned their small second bedroom into a nursery. They painted the walls yellow and put up pictures of animals. James's family threw them a big baby shower with lots of gifts. Sarah's parents sent a beautiful handmade crib that had been in their family for generations. As her due date got closer, Sarah and James talked about moving to a bigger place. "Maybe we should look for a house in the suburbs," James suggested. "Somewhere with good schools and a yard for the baby to play in." One weekend, they drove out to look at houses. They found a perfect little house with 3 bedrooms and a big backyard. It was in a neighborhood where many young families lived. Sarah could imagine their child growing up there, riding a bike on the sidewalk and playing with neighborhood kids. They made an offer on the house, and it was accepted. Now they had to sell their apartment and pack up their belongings. It was a busy, exciting time. Then, one night, Sarah woke up in pain. It was too early. The baby wasn't due for another 6 weeks. "Something's wrong," she told James. James rushed her to the hospital. The doctors said the baby was coming too soon. They would try to stop the labor, but they couldn't promise anything. For 3 days, Sarah lay in the hospital bed while doctors did everything they could to keep her baby safe. James never left her side. He held her hand and told her everything would be okay, even though he was scared too. Sarah's parents drove to the city as soon as they heard the news. They took turns sitting with Sarah when James had to step out of the room. Sarah's mother brought food from home and made sure James was eating. Sarah's father paced the halls, stopping to talk with the doctors whenever he could. On the 4th day, the doctors said they couldn't stop the labor any longer. The baby was coming now, ready or not. "Will the baby be okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We'll do everything we can," the doctor promised. The delivery was difficult. Sarah was in labor for 18 hours. James stayed with her the whole time, wiping her forehead and helping her breathe through the pain. Outside in the waiting room, both sets of parents, Sarah's and James', sat together, praying for their children and grandchild. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a tiny cry filled the delivery room. A baby girl, small but alive and fighting. "She's beautiful," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. The baby had to stay in the hospital for several weeks because she was so small. Sarah and James spent every moment they could with her. They named her Hope because that's what she gave them. Sarah's parents and James's parents took turns bringing food and clean clothes to the hospital. They all worked together to support Sarah and James during this difficult time. In the face of this family crisis, all the old prejudices seemed small and unimportant. Baby Hope grew stronger every day. After 6 weeks in the hospital, she was finally able to go home. Not to the apartment in the city, but to the new house in the suburbs that James's parents had helped prepare while Sarah and James were at the hospital. The first few months with the newborn were hard. Hope woke up many times each night. Sarah was tired all the time. James took as much time off work as he could to help. Both sets of grandparents took turns staying with them to lend a hand. One afternoon, Sarah found her father sitting in the rocking chair with Hope asleep on his chest. He was singing softly to her, a lullaby he used to sing to Sarah when she was small. "She looks like you did as a baby," he told Sarah. "Same nose, same little chin." "She has James's eyes," Sarah said. Her father nodded. "Yes, she does. She's beautiful." As Hope grew, she brought even more joy to the family. By her first birthday, she was walking and saying a few words. Both families came together to celebrate. The house was full of love and laughter. When Hope was 2, Sarah went back to teaching part-time at a school near their home. James was now a senior doctor at the hospital. They had a good life together. But Sarah noticed something troubling. When they took Hope to the park, some mothers would pull their children away from Hope. At the grocery store, people sometimes stared at their family. The world outside their home wasn't always kind to a mixed-race family. One day, a woman at the park asked Sarah, "Is she yours? She doesn't look like you." Sarah was angry. "Yes, she's my daughter," she said firmly. That night, she talked to James about it. "How do we protect her from people like that?" "We can't protect her from everything," James said sadly. "But we can make sure she knows how loved she is. We can make her strong." Sarah's parents were visiting that weekend. Her father overheard their conversation. "I owe you both an apology," he said, sitting down with them at the kitchen table. "I was once one of those people who stared and judged. I was wrong. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." "What changed your mind?" James asked. "You did," Sarah's father replied. "The way you loved my daughter. The way you stood by her when I turned my back. And now, seeing that beautiful child sleeping upstairs, my granddaughter, how could I not change?" That summer, they all decided to go to Maplewood for the town's annual 4th of July picnic. Sarah was nervous about bringing Hope to the town that had once rejected her and James. "Are you sure about this?" she asked James. "It's time," he said, "and we'll have our families with us." The day of the picnic was hot and sunny. They spread blankets on the grass in the town park. Hope ran around chasing butterflies, her curly hair bouncing in the sunlight. At first, people kept their distance. Old habits were hard to break. But then Sheriff Taylor, now retired, came over with his wife. "This must be the little one I've heard so much about," he said, smiling at Hope. "My Becky says she's the prettiest child in 3 counties. He sat down with them, and suddenly the invisible barrier seemed to break. More people came over to say hello. Mrs. Peterson from church brought lemonade. The librarian gave Hope a picture book. Even Tom Mitchell, who Sarah's mother had once suggested as a better match for Sarah, stopped by with his wife and children. Not everyone in town came around, of course. Some people still kept their distance. Some still whispered behind their hands. But more people were welcoming than Sarah had expected. As they packed up to leave at the end of the day, Sarah's mother squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "It took courage to come back here." "It was time," Sarah replied, watching as James swung Hope onto his shoulders, her little hands holding tight to his head. That night, as they drove back to the city, Sarah thought about how far they had come. The road hadn't been easy. There would still be hard days ahead, but they were facing them together as a family. Time moved quickly. Hope grew from a toddler into a little girl who loved books and climbing trees. When she was 5, Sarah and James had another baby, a boy they named David. Their family felt complete. Hope started kindergarten at the local elementary school. On her first day, Sarah was worried. Would the other children be kind to her? Would the teachers treat her fairly? "Mommy, I'll be fine," Hope said, straightening her new backpack. "I'm not scared." Sarah watched her brave little girl walk into the school building. Hope had a strength that amazed Sarah, a confidence that came from knowing she was loved. Life settled into a comfortable routine. James was now the head of his department at the hospital. Sarah taught 3rd grade at Hope's school. The children thrived. Their house was always full of friends, family, and laughter. But then, when Hope was 10 and David was 5, Sarah's father got sick. Cancer. The doctors said it had spread too far. There was nothing they could do. Sarah and James packed up the children and drove to Maplewood. Sarah's mother was trying to be strong, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes. "We'll stay as long as you need us," Sarah promised. They rented a small house in town for the summer. James arranged to take a leave from the hospital. Sarah's school year had just ended, so she was free to help care for her father. The people of Maplewood surprised Sarah. Many of them brought food to her mother's house. They offered to drive her father to his appointments. They sent cards and flowers. The town that had once been so cold to her and James now showed warmth and care. One evening, Sarah found her father sitting on the porch swing. He looked thin and tired, but his eyes were clear. She sat next to him. "I was wrong, Sarah," he said quietly, "about so many things." "Dad, you don't have to." "No, I need to say this," he interrupted. "I was wrong about James. I was wrong about what makes a good man, a good husband, a good father. James is all of those things." Sarah took her father's hand. It felt so small now, so fragile. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," he continued. "You knew better than I did. You saw what was important." A few days later, Sarah's father asked to speak with James alone. They sat together in the garden while Sarah watched from the kitchen window. She couldn't hear what they said, but she saw her father reach out and place his hand on James's shoulder. She saw James nod, his face serious. Later, when she asked James what they had talked about, he just said, "He wanted to make sure I would always take care of you." As summer turned to fall, Sarah's father grew weaker. The family gathered around his bed in the house where Sarah had grown up. Hope and David sat quietly beside their grandfather, sometimes reading to him or showing him their drawings. James used his medical knowledge to make sure her father was comfortable and freed from pain. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah's father passed away. The whole town came to the funeral. The little church was packed with people paying their respects. Sarah stood between her mother and James, with Hope and David beside them. James's parents had also come from the city to show their support. After the service, many people came up to offer condolences. Several of them specifically spoke to James. "Your father-in-law was a good man," said Mr. Johnson, who once couldn't look James in the eye. "He spoke highly of you." Later, at the house, Sarah found an envelope in her father's desk with James's name on it. Inside was a letter and her father's pocket watch, which had been passed down through generations of Wilson men. "He wanted you to have this," Sarah said, giving the watch to James, "to pass on to David someday." James held the watch carefully, understanding the significance of the gift. This was more than a timepiece. It was acceptance. It was family. It was a bridge across the divide that had once seemed so wide. That night, as they lay in bed in Sarah's childhood room, James held Sarah as she cried. "He loved you in the end," she said through her tears. "He really did." "I know," James replied softly, "and I respected him." 20 years passed. Hope grew up, went to college, and became a lawyer. David followed in his father's footsteps and went to medical school. Sarah and James were proud of their children, who had grown into kind, confident adults. After Sarah's father died, her mother lived alone in the house in Maplewood for a few years. Then she moved into a small apartment closer to Sarah and James. They had dinner together every Sunday. She was a loving grandmother who spoiled her grandchildren with cookies and stories. Sarah and James were now in their 50s. Their hair was starting to gray, but they were still active and healthy. James was a respected doctor known for his gentle manner with patients. Sarah had become the principal of her elementary school, loved by teachers and students alike. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, Sarah felt a sharp pain in her head while she was at work. She collapsed in the school hallway. A teacher called 911, then called James. By the time James got to the hospital, Sarah was already in surgery. A blood vessel had burst in her brain. An aneurysm, the doctors explained. It was serious, very serious. For 3 days, Sarah lay unconscious in the intensive care unit. James never left her side. Their children came immediately. Hope from her law office in another state, David from medical school across the country. Sarah's mother moved into their house temporarily to help. Friends and colleagues filled the hospital waiting room. Many brought food or offered to help in any way they could. Even people from Maplewood drove to the city when they heard the news. Sheriff Taylor's daughter Becky, now a grown woman with children of her own, came with flowers from her garden. On the 4th day, the doctors told James that Sarah's condition was getting worse, not better. The damage to her brain was too severe. There was nothing more they could do. "How long?" James asked, his voice breaking. "A few days at most," the doctor replied gently. "I'm so sorry." James gathered the family in Sarah's hospital room. Hope held her mother's hand on one side. David stood at the foot of the bed, trying to be strong. Sarah's mother sat in a chair nearby, looking small and lost. James sat on the other side of the bed, holding Sarah's other hand. "She can hear us," he told them. "Talk to her. Tell her what she means to you." For the next 2 days, they took turns sitting with Sarah. They played her favorite music. They read from her favorite books. They told her stories about their lives together. Word spread that Sarah was dying. More people came to say goodbye. Teachers and students from her school, friends from college, neighbors from their street, even Tom Mitchell from Maplewood, who had once hoped to marry Sarah himself, came with his wife to pay his respects. On the morning of the 3rd day, the doctor checked Sarah's vital signs and shook his head. "It won't be long now," he said quietly. One by one, the visitors left to give the family privacy in their final moments with Sarah. Even Hope and David went to the cafeteria to get coffee, leaving James alone with his wife. "I love you, Sarah," he whispered, holding her hand against his cheek. "You changed my life. You saw me when no one else did." Sarah's breathing became irregular. James called for the children and Sarah's mother. They rushed back to the room, gathering around the bed. Together, they watched as Sarah took her last breaths. In her final moment, as she slipped away, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. She looked at each of them, her children, her mother, and finally, her gaze settled on James. A small smile touched her lips. Then she was gone. The funeral was held in the city, at the church where Sarah and James had attended for years. The building was overflowing with people whose lives Sarah had touched. Former students, now grown with children of their own, colleagues from the school, friends from the neighborhood, and many people from Maplewood, the town that had once rejected her. At the graveside, as they lowered Sarah's casket into the ground, James stood tall and strong, holding hands with Hope and David. Sarah's mother stood beside them, supported by James's parents, who were now in their 80s, but had come to say goodbye to the woman who had been like a daughter to them. As people began to leave, an old man approached James. It was Mr. Johnson from Maplewood, now bent with age. "You know," he said, leaning on his cane, "she was right to choose you. All those years ago, she saw what the rest of us couldn't see." James nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. At the end of the day, when everyone else had gone, only James remained at her grave, just as he had remained by her side through everything. The rejection, the struggle, the joy, and now, the grief, just as she had known he would from the very beginning.